my Harry Potter series is actually going to get interesting with some of my more controversial, or at the very least, different opinions on this franchise. Though this one in particular was not one I was actually aware that was different from the norm until I saw the honest trailer of Harry Potter, and when they got to Chamber of Secrets, they called it the one everyone hates. Confused, I looked into it, and found that this one in the franchise is one of the more or less favored. And I was honestly very confused, because I always thought Chamber of Secrets was one of the very best in the entire Harry Potter franchise. And honestly, I just don't get it. None of what I've read really accounts as this being a bad story, or even just the weakest of the series. I'm honestly talking about both the book and the movie here. Therefore, I shall do like I did on the last episode, and proceed to talk about each on their own merits. Again, as the same with my review of Sorcerer's Stone, the book is essentially the same as the movie, only in this case, even more so. I mainly have this section in my reviews so the template is there for when I do the later installments. These first novels were rather easy to adapt faithfully. However, when the later novels begin to double in size is when this part of my reviews has a sizable chunk of material to discuss. But right now, all I can say about the novel of Chamber of Secrets is in this one, J.K. Rowling really proved that her first installment was no fluke. She said this one was probably the hardest to write because of all the pressure from her first book doing so well. She took the advantage of already setting up the world and pushed it to the advantage by beginning to introduce new characters, concepts, and ideas. This is one of my favorites in the entire Harry Potter series. It's still lighthearted for the most part, but that makes the shifts of tone to the more frightening elements more exciting. In terms of writing, it's just as good as the last, if not better. It does admittedly have a slowish start, but once the main mystery begins to form, it overall becomes more investing than the first, and the clues are revealed in a cleverer way than just Hagrid slipping out random details. But the film analysis is where I'm going to take a look at the story as a whole. As a novel, I'm going to give Chamber of Secrets a 9.5 out of 10. Very good. As a kid, this was possibly my favorite movie. I remember the first time I saw this was at my godparents' house. I got so wrapped up in everything that happened, I completely forgot where I was. It really transported me to Hogwarts. I was really old enough this time to appreciate it all. This is also the first one I saw after reading the book first. So maybe this really is nostalgia getting down to me. Maybe I'm so defensive of this film because I just don't want to admit it's lessened in my eyes. And on this rewatch, I really tried to figure out major flaws that made me see why others may think lesser of this one. And nope, at least not legitimate ones. In this video, I'm going to try and look at some of what I think might be some people's big issues with this film, at least from my observations. I looked up down the internet and I just found a bunch of 2-star reviews with very little detail. But guess who's on my side in this endeavor? Yup, Roger Ebert. So at least I'm not alone in thinking that this film is freaking amazing. First off, I heard that this film is boringly directed and the technical camera work is lackluster, and I really couldn't disagree more. Is it a perfect marvel in this area? No, but I do think that there's genuine impressive moments in this film. It's just not as stylistically distinctive as Prisoner of Azkaban, which came right afterwards. And that's fine, not every movie has to be like that. And at any rate, there's some shots in this movie that legitimately work and leave an impression on me. Plus, the effects are noticeably improved from the first. For a CGI character, Dobby looks pretty good. He's no Gollum, of course, but it still works. Plus, the way the creature effects are implemented is incredible. The Basileus in this movie is seriously one of my all-time favorite movie monsters. John Williams wasn't able to entirely conduct the music for this film as he had a ridiculously busy schedule in 2002. But still, he added a bunch of wonderful new themes to the mix here. So yeah, in this area, I'd say the film is pretty solid and actually pretty great. Another big one that I've heard a few times is that this movie is too similar to the first, which I honestly don't get at all. One, it's set as a school, and school life is sort of repetitive. There's a Quidditch match, and they go into the forest at the end, and the finale takes place in an underground secret passageway beneath the school. Hogwarts is a set geography. You have to take advantage of the same sorts of areas in different ways. It's not much more of a mystery to find a hidden place if it's secretly next to a second-floor classroom. Plus, Azkaban, the one everyone loves, still adheres to this. There's a Quidditch match, they go into the forest, and it's all about the underground passageways. It just switched it up slightly. The later books and the films wisely figured that the finales would need to start happening away from Hogwarts to keep things fresh, and indeed, that became the case. But in these first two movies, the scale of world isn't ready to be explored beyond the castle grounds, so keeping it confined there and just exploring more of the castle's secrets is the most logical course of action at this point in the franchise. In every way it may seem similar on the surface, it does something vastly different. It expands upon it, which is another issue people point to. The Chamber of Secrets theatrical cut clocks in at 2 hours 41 minutes, while the extended cut is almost 3 hours. And for me, I've always been extremely okay with long movies. I'm more likely to complain if a movie is too short than I am for it to be too long. As long as that length is packed with drama, action, character, and good visuals, I couldn't care less. And Chamber of Secrets provides all of that. If I go through this film, there isn't really much to cut. It's just essentially the book page by page. And I'm never bored for a second, and the movie goes by so fast. The later movies naturally were forced to abandon this approach to varying success, but I say this way really worked. Chamber of Secrets have some really great new characters thrown into the mix. Last time I made the argument that these movies also function as seeing kids become and evolve to good actors, and this movie really makes that distinct with two of its new characters, Lucius Malfoy and Gilderoy Lockhart. It's honestly so much fun to see the kids taking their roles so seriously, while the adults find the roles as an excuse to let loose and have a ridiculous amount of fun. I think Kenneth Branagh's Gilderoy Lockhart is practically the J.K. Simmons of the Harry Potter franchise. This character is pulled right from the page, and Kenneth makes every second he's on screen so infectiously fun. He's just brimming with conceited charm right out of one of the Shakespeares that Branagh is so fond of. Jason Isaacs as Lucius Malfoy is on the other side of the spectrum. He just chews up the scenery with pure malice, and it's a joy to watch. But they're giving these young actors a chance to prove themselves. One of my favorite behind-the-scenes stories is that in this scene, Isaacs completely improvised.
Well, let us hope that Mr. Potter will always be around to save the day.
Just to give an extra flair to exit from Dumbledore's office. But without any cue at all, Daniel Radcliffe fired right back.
Don't worry. I will be.
I must also mention Richard Harris's Dumbledore. He sadly passed away after the filming of Chamber of Secrets, but he really did work well for this role. He brought to life the eccentric kindliness of Dumbledore perfectly. His predecessor did something different with his approach, which we will get to eventually, but Harris's Dumbledore worked perfectly within the first two installments. Really struck me as a kid was how scary this movie could be, and that's why I loved it. The later movies are far more consistently dark. The bleakness gets to a point of constant surrounding so that you get numb to it. With Chamber of Secrets, it's actually frightening because lots of the movie is comedic and lighthearted. With 1 second you're laughing at Gilderoy's antics, and the next second you're freaking out because our protagonists are about to be devoured by 100 giant spiders!
Goodbye, friend of Hagrid.
Can we panic now?
Oh look, here's another fun Quidditch match, and all of a sudden, BAM! One of our three leads is out of the picture. This raises the stakes and makes even little kids motivated to get through the dark and scary stuff with our main characters. That's why the best kids movies are also the ones that push the envelope. Because a little kid can watch your worthless Minions movie, but that's not going to leave as big an impact as something scary from one of the early Disney films. At least that's how I was as a kid. It's a mindset I can still appreciate to this very day. Another thing that makes Chamber of Secrets special is that this one actually begins to bring up more of the themes that motivate the entire series. In the first one, we know Voldemort is evil, but we never find out why. Here we get the purposes. It may be small, but the first use of the word mudblood is what rooted the series in a battle between the forces of equality and the forces of puritanical exclusionism and superiority. It lets you know what the point of everything is leading to. A single word can represent so much, as Severus Snape can tell you very well. I know I'm yet to mention that character in these reviews, but I promise we'll get to him at the right time. The issue of house elves and possible slavery comes out. And again, this is something I'll get into more detail when I review Goblet of Fire, as that's a better place to talk about it. All of this shows that the world Harry enters is less perfect and more magical than it first may have seemed. And also, it emphasizes the other big theme in this overarching narrative, death and the meaning of life. In the first one, Harry stops Voldemort from coming back, but in here, he stops Voldemort from coming back, and he saves his best friend's sister's life essence from fading, and he nearly dies because of that choice. And this is my final point we're getting to, why Chamber of Secrets is one of the best films in this entire series. In Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, Harry learns he can do special things, magic and all the works. But it's interesting to note he actually never cast a spell in the first film. He did in the book, sure, but even then, his character is wide-eyed and into self-discovery. He wants to stop Voldemort from taking the stone, but his triumph over him is a circumstance he had no control over. He just had magic death striking murder burn hands. But in Chamber of Secrets, he actually begins to take initiative. He really begins to be a hero instead of just a wizard detective. The little blurb on the back of the VHS I wore out as a kid says it all. Harry finds out he's not just a wizard, he's a hero. He's not incompetent. Everyone keeps banging on about how better Hermione is than him, and maybe in Sorcerer's Stone, but here, he proves that this isn't true. One of my favorite sequences in the entire series, and possibly my favorite, is Harry versus the Basileus. True, he may have failed if it wasn't for Fawkes swooping in, but even then, he was the one to draw the sword out of the sorting hat. He proved he could do it. And in one of the most baddest moments of the entire series, a 12-year-old kills a giant-ass venomous snake. I mean, I just love that so much. And possibly his bravest action of all, after all that sacrifice, when he's dying from the Basileus venom, if one looks in the text of the novel Chamber of Secrets, and in the film, you can sort of tell it's the same, when dying, he's already more mature than Voldemort will ever be. He accepts death. At that moment, he proves he's more powerful, more wise, and more brave than his mortal enemy right after destroying one of the objects that represents his foe's true folly. Harry is already at peace with death. And as Dumbledore said,
"It is not our abilities that show what we truly are. It is our choices."
This is the central theme of Harry's journey in Chamber of Secrets. And maybe it didn't strike a chord with everyone that hates this film for whatever reason, but it did with me as a kid, and it still does. Chamber of Secrets is not flawless, but it's another one of those films where the great outweighs anything less than that. I honestly think it even improves on the book a little. I still laugh at Lockhart's antics, I still cheer during the Basileus scene, I still tear up at the scene where Hagrid returns at the end and everyone begins to clap, and it's so corny, but it works so well. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets gets a 10 out of 10. Comments on this one will be any interesting. But at any rate, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you feel sufficiently inclined.